My family demanded I forgive my brother for sleeping with my fiancée. So I smiled, nodded politely, and silently cut every financial cord that held their world together. I got home 3 days early. The commercial engineering project in Denver had wrapped up far ahead of schedule. Foundation inspections passed with flying colors, city permits were signed off without a single issue, and the entire site was locked down by Thursday afternoon instead of Sunday night. My regional director told me to take the extra days off, a rare bonus in my line of work. I briefly considered staying in Denver, hitting a local brewery, maybe catching a hockey game, and enjoying the solitude, but I hadn't seen Chloe in 2 solid weeks. And honestly, the ache in my chest was real. I missed her. So, I drove straight from the site to the airport, caught the absolute last flight out, and landed back in my home city right around 10:30 p.m. I deliberately didn't text her. I wanted it to be a surprise. On the drive from the airport, I stopped at a 24-hour grocery store near our apartment complex and grabbed a bouquet of sunflowers. They were those cheap ones that come wrapped in that crinkly translucent plastic sleeve, but Chloe always insisted she liked them better than the fancy, overpriced arrangements from boutique florists. They feel more real, she used to say. I remember specifically thinking about that exact phrase on the drive over. How she always preferred the real things. I pulled into our complex and parked in our usual assigned spot on the 3rd floor of the parking garage, right next to the concrete stairwell. I grabbed my heavy canvas duffel bag from the trunk, held the sunflowers in my other hand, and headed up to the apartment. Our apartment, the one we'd been living in together for a year and a half, the one where for the past 6 months we'd been actively planning our wedding. The date was firmly set for next April. The downtown venue was fully booked with a non-refundable deposit, and the custom invitations were already designed and sitting in a digital folder on my laptop. I unlocked the front door as quietly as humanly possible. I didn't want to startle her if she was asleep. The living room was pitch dark. The TV was off, casting a black reflection across the room. Her silver laptop was closed and sitting neatly on the edge of the glass coffee table. I figured she'd just gone to bed early. She had mentioned feeling exhausted from work in her last text to me around 8 p.m. Then I heard it. Laughter. It was coming from the master bedroom down the short hallway, and it wasn't just her laugh. There were 2 distinct voices, and one of them I knew entirely too well. I stopped dead in my tracks in the middle of the hallway. The cheap plastic around the sunflowers crinkled slightly in my tightening grip. My heavy duffel bag was still slung over my right shoulder. For one fleeting, desperate second, my brain tried to rationalize it. I thought maybe I was just tired. Maybe she was watching a YouTube video on her phone. Maybe she had a friend over and I was about to walk in, flip the light switch, and feel like an absolute idiot for the sudden, nauseating spike of adrenaline in my veins. But I knew that laugh. It was Julian, my younger brother. I stood there in the dark hallway for maybe 10 full seconds. I wasn't moving. I wasn't even breathing. I was just processing the auditory information hitting my ears. Then I forced my legs to move. I walked to the bedroom door. I didn't rush like a madman, but I didn't hesitate either. I just walked, reached out, and pushed the door open. Chloe was on top of him in my bed on my side of the mattress, tangled in the soft, expensive sheets we had picked out together at a boutique downtown because she wanted something with a high thread count, and I didn't care about the price as long as it made her happy. They both froze instantly. The scene was burned into my retinas in a fraction of a second. Chloe's face drained of all color, turning a sickly, ghostly white. Julian violently scrambled backward, trying to yank the duvet up over his chest, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water as he tried to form a word. I didn't yell, I just looked at them. I really truly looked. I saw Chloe's gold pendant necklace, the specific one I had bought her for our first anniversary, resting carelessly on my wooden nightstand. I saw Julian's familiar blue button-down shirt tossed casually on the floor right next to my side of the bed. I saw 2 half-empty wine glasses sitting on the long dresser. They had been comfortable. This wasn't a frantic drunken one-time mistake. The casual placement of their things screamed routine. Right then and there, something inside of me just clicked off. It was almost audible in my own head, a heavy mechanical switch flipping from on to off. It wasn't a fiery, blinding anger. It wasn't even a sharp, agonizing hurt. It was just this freezing cold, crystal clear realization that the person I thought I was going to marry simply did not exist. And the brother I had protected my whole life was a stranger. Chloe started hyperventilating, tears immediately spilling down her cheeks. Elias. Elias. Please. I held up my hand. A simple flat palm facing her. I didn't utter a single syllable. I just held it up. The sheer authority of the gesture made her snap her mouth shut. She choked on a sob, but she stopped talking. Julian tried next, his voice cracking. Bro, please just let me explain. It's not. I slowly turned my eyes to him. My little brother, the guy I had personally tutored so he could pass his college finals. The guy I had co-signed a car loan for 3 years ago when his credit score was absolute garbage and no dealership would look at him. The guy who had called me just 2 months ago asking for advice about a complicated girl he was seeing. I guess I finally knew exactly who that complicated girl was. I turned on my heel and walked straight to the walk-in closet. I dropped the bouquet of sunflowers directly into the small plastic trash can by the door. I didn't even look down as they fell. I pulled out my large travel duffel, the one I used for long deployments, and unzipped it. I started packing. Chloe scrambled out of bed, wrapping a bed sheet around herself, trailing behind me. She was sobbing uncontrollably now, reaching out with a trembling hand to touch my back. Elias, please don't do this. We can talk. Please talk to me. I moved around her like she was a floor lamp. I grabbed my personal laptop and its charger. I crouched down, pulled the small fireproof lockbox from under the shoe rack, and emptied it. Passport, birth certificate, social security card, insurance documents. I threw in 3 changes of clothes, grabbing whatever my hands touched first. I walked into the master bathroom, completely ignoring the second toothbrush in the cup, and swept my toiletries into a leather bag. Julian was in the bedroom now, hurriedly pulling on his jeans, tripping over the hem in his panic. He tried to physically step between me and the bedroom door. Elias, man, please don't just walk out, hit me, yell at me, just say something to me. I stopped. I looked at him, my eyes completely dead. I adjusted the strap of my duffel bag on my shoulder. Don't, I said. That was it. Just that one flat, icy word. He visibly recoiled, stepping back as if I had physically struck him. 15 minutes. That's exactly how long it took to pack everything in that apartment that actually mattered to my survival. Everything else, the expensive mid-century furniture I bought, the high-end kitchen appliances, the massive stack of wedding planning binders sitting on the dining table, none of it meant a damn thing anymore. It was all just dead weight. I walked past both of them toward the front door. Chloe lunged, grabbing my forearm with both hands, her fingernails digging into my skin. Elias, you can't just leave. Where are you going? I gently, methodically peeled her fingers off my arm. I didn't look at her face. I knew if I looked at her eyes the coldness might crack, and I couldn't afford that. I opened the front door. Julian called my name one last time. A pathetic, wavering sound. I walked out, letting the heavy door click shut and lock behind me. I drove to the nearest extended stay hotel, right off the interstate. I checked in at the front desk, handed the night auditor my credit card with a perfectly steady hand, and took the elevator to the 4th floor. I walked into the generic beige room, dropped my bag on the floor, and sat on the edge of the stiff mattress. I didn't cry. I didn't scream into a pillow. I didn't punch the drywall. I didn't call my best friend. I just sat there in the sterile silence. My phone started vibrating relentlessly around midnight. It was a continuous, nauseating buzz. Texts from Chloe pouring in by the dozen. Desperate phone calls from Julian. I didn't block them yet. I just flipped the physical mute switch on the side of my phone and laid it face up on the nightstand. I watched the screen light up over and over, the notifications piling into a tower of panic. By 3 a.m., I realized sleep was entirely out of the question. My mind was running at 1,000 miles an hour, but it wasn't running on grief. It was running on pure, unadulterated logistics. I opened my laptop, the screen blindingly bright in the dark hotel room. I opened Excel. I didn't start a journal entry about my broken heart. I started making a list, a very specific, highly detailed list of connections. Every single business contact I had personally shared with Julian, every high-paying corporate client I had referred to Chloe's freelance design business, every financial tie, loan, and shared account connected to my parents. Every single piece of my life that was structurally supporting theirs. I stared at the rows and columns for a long time. The cursor blinked steadily at the end of a cell. Then I renamed the file. I titled it Exit Strategy XLSX, and I got to work. I was at the hotel gym by 6 a.m. I hadn't slept a single second, but I didn't feel tired. I felt mechanical, dangerous. I hit the treadmill first, running for 5 miles until my lungs burned. Then I moved to the free weights. Every lift, every rep was counted out in my head, a rhythmic distraction from the images trying to flash behind my eyes. My phone was face down on the rubber floor mat. I could see the edges lighting up constantly. I ignored it. I finished my workout around 7:45 a.m. Went back to my room, took a scalding hot shower, and put on clean clothes. I walked to a local coffee shop across the street, ordered a large black coffee, sat in my car, and finally unlocked my phone. Chloe 5. 2 unread messages. They started with frantic apologies. I'm so sorry. It meant nothing. Transitioned into long rambling explanations. We were drinking. I've been so stressed about the wedding, and finally ended with defensive anger. You can't just abandon me like this. We need to communicate. You're being emotionally cruel. Julian, 31 missed calls, 14 voicemails. I didn't listen to a single one. And then, right at 8:15 a.m., my screen lit up with an incoming call. Mom. I stared at her contact photo on the screen. I let it ring 4 full times, taking a slow sip of my coffee before I finally swiped to answer. Elias. Her voice was already trembling, thick with tears. Oh, my sweet boy. Julian called us. He told us everything. I leaned back against the leather headrest of my car, staring out the windshield at the morning traffic. I said, absolutely nothing. He feels terrible, Elias, she continued, her voice taking on a pleading tone. He is absolutely destroyed over this. He made a mistake, honey. A terrible, horrible, stupid mistake. But Elias, he's your brother and he loves you so much. And Chloe, she's mom. I interrupted. My voice was calm, entirely flat. She stopped abruptly, breathless. I'm listening, Elias. I hear you, I said softly. That tiny sliver of non-confrontation was all she needed. She launched into a massive rehearsed monologue. She talked about the sanctity of family. She talked about forgiveness. She talked about how Julian didn't mean for it to go that far, how human beings are deeply flawed, how these situations are complicated, and how the true measure of a man is how he moves forward and forgives those who trespass against him. I let her talk for 10 straight minutes. I gave her a few MMs and I understand what you're saying. In all the right pauses, she started to sound genuinely relieved. She thought she was getting through to me. She thought the crisis was being managed. Your father wants to talk to you this weekend, she finally said, her tone brightening. We're going to have a nice, quiet family dinner on Sunday. Just the family. We can all sit down, air everything out, and work through this together, sweetheart. We can fix this. I'll think about it, I said. Oh. She sounded shocked but incredibly hopeful. Oh, Elias, that's wonderful. That's really, really good. Honey, I'm so proud of you for being so reasonable about this. Reasonable? I have to go, Mom. I have work to handle. Of course, but you'll really think about Sunday. Yeah, I'll think about it. I hung up the phone. I didn't think about Sunday for even a fraction of a second. Around 10 a.m. My older sister, Maya, texted me. Maya, I just got off the phone with Mom. I heard Elias. I am so sorry. Are you okay? Where are you? I stared at her message. Maya was vastly different from the rest of the family. She was genuinely kind-hearted and she actually gave a crap about me. But I also knew exactly what her role in the family dynamic was. The ultimate peacekeeper. She was the one who would feel utterly horrified by what Julian did, but would still show up to the Sunday dinner because someone has to keep this family from falling apart. She meant well, but her desperate need for harmony made her a pawn. That was the problem. Me. I'm fine, Maya. I'm safe. I just need some space right now. Maya, do you want me to come meet you? We can just sit. You don't have to talk. Me? Not yet. But can you do me a favor? Can you just keep me updated on what's happening at Mom and Dad's? Maya. Of course. Whatever you need, Elias. I love you. Perfect. I had my inside man. 2 weeks later, I was living in Seattle. The corporate transfer happened with blinding speed. The morning after the discovery, I called my regional director. I told him I needed a geographic change immediately. I didn't explain the personal details. I didn't have to. I had been heavily floating the idea of moving to the Seattle branch as a strategic career move for the past 6 months. Anyway, because of my track record, he pulled a few massive strings and made the transfer official in exactly 3 days. I secured a new apartment online. It was on the 12th floor of a high-rise downtown with massive floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. It was significantly nicer than the old place, and considerably more expensive too. But I could easily afford it now that I wasn't splitting rent or funneling a massive chunk of my paycheck into a joint wedding savings account. I bought entirely new furniture. Very minimalist, sleek, modern stuff. Absolutely nothing that looked, felt, or smelled like the life I had left behind. I found a new gym. I found a new coffee spot. I mapped out a new running route along the waterfront. I didn't post a single photo or status update on social media. I didn't change my relationship status. I just quietly deactivated the accounts. I completely ghosted my own life. The only person who had my new address and knew what city I was in was Maya. Meanwhile, back in my high-rise, I was building something else. I opened the spreadsheet. I pulled up every single engineering and consulting project I had worked on for the past 6 years. I cross-referenced every single corporate contact, vendor, and partner. I mapped the entire network out with the precision of a structural engineer analyzing a skyscraper's load distribution. Julian's booming commercial real estate career. His 3 biggest, most lucrative deals came directly from high-net-worth developers I had personally introduced him to at my company's charity galas. His massive breakthrough partnership at Harrison Development. That was my firm's direct client. I had personally vouched for Julian when his resume was completely empty, and he was working out of a coffee shop. Chloe's thriving freelance graphic design business. Her top 3 anchor clients, the ones paying her massive monthly retainers, all came through my personal network, college buddies who had founded tech startups, Former colleagues who had moved to marketing firms. They hired her exclusively because I told them to. My parents' lavish upper-middle-class lifestyle. I had been quietly, invisibly subsidizing it for years. The $11,000 a year elite country club membership, I expensed it through my corporate account by creatively categorizing it as executive client entertainment venue access. The dual luxury car leases a Lexus for mom and a BMW for dad. I had co-signed both of them when dad's credit score took a massive nosedive during his failed angel investing phase 3 years ago. The $90,000 home equity line of credit. They used to remodel their kitchen and take vacations. It was entirely backed and approved based on my income verification. I documented every single thread. I built the spreadsheet exactly like I was planning the controlled demolition of a building. I identified the foundation, the support beams, and the load-bearing walls. It turned out, I was the single load-bearing wall for all 4 of them. Update 1. 3 months into my new life in Seattle, Maya sent me a picture. It was a candid shot of a family dinner. Everyone was gathered around the large oak dining table at my parents' house. Julian and Chloe were sitting right next to each other. My parents were at the head of the table, smiling warmly, holding up glasses of wine. Maya and her husband were seated across from them. Maya's text read. They officially announced they're taking things seriously. Mom and dad seem incredibly supportive. They toasted to new beginnings. Elias, I feel sick even being here. I don't know how to handle this. I zoomed in on the photo on my phone screen. Julian had his arm draped casually over Chloe's shoulders. They looked deeply comfortable, like they had been a legitimate public couple for years. And then I noticed it. Chloe's throat. She was wearing the gold pendant necklace, the one I bought her for our anniversary. She was wearing my gift while sitting next to my brother at my parents' table. I stared at that specific cluster of pixels for 5 solid minutes. My heart rate didn't elevate. My breathing didn't hitch. I just felt that cold mechanical switch secure itself permanently in the off position. I closed the photo. I didn't respond to Maya. Instead, I opened my laptop, pulled up my contacts, and found the direct cell number for Harrison Development's VP, a guy named Greg. We had worked closely on a massive downtown revitalization project. I knew for a fact that Julian had been aggressively pitching Greg on a massive new commercial partnership. It was supposed to be Julian's golden ticket for the year. I hit call. Elias. Greg's booming voice came through the speaker. Man. How's Seattle treating you? I heard you took the big promotion. Good, Greg. Really good. City's treating me well. Hey, do you have a minute? I wanted to talk to you about some upcoming project opportunities for you always. What's on your mind, brother? Couple of things. First, are you still in talks with my brother Julian? There was a slight pause on the line. Yeah. We've been having some meetings. Nothing is finalized yet. Just drawing up some preliminary numbers. Why? Right, I said, keeping my tone entirely professional, devoid of any familial emotion. Well, I've got some other much larger partnerships. I'm currently structuring firms with vastly better capital backing and stronger portfolios. Frankly, they'd be a much better fit for Harrison's new quarter goals than Julian's current setup. Are you free for a video call on Tuesday to go over the portfolios? Another pause. Greg wasn't stupid. He was a shark. He heard the underlying message loud and clear. Drop my brother or lose me. Tuesday, at 2 p.m. Works perfectly. Elias, Greg said smoothly. Send me the calendar invite. I hung up the phone. I opened the spreadsheet. I highlighted the cell containing Julian's Harrison deal. I turned the cell background red. The withdrawal had officially begun. 6 months disappeared faster than I could have ever anticipated. Seattle truly became my home. Not in a sad, running away nostalgic sense, but in a completely functional, empowering way. I knew exactly which artisan coffee shop opened at 5 a.m. Which specific highway routes avoided the brutal morning gridlock, and which rooftop bars poured the heaviest drinks during happy hour. Work was incredible. I was operating at a completely different frequency. My regional director pulled me into his glass office after a massive Q3 presentation and told me I was performing at a level he hadn't seen in a decade. He wasn't wrong. It's truly amazing how much mental bandwidth you suddenly have when you aren't unknowingly pouring 50% of your emotional and financial energy into a relationship that is secretly rotting from the inside out. I even started dating. Nothing heavy, nothing serious. I met a sharp, fiercely intelligent corporate lawyer named Naomi at a downtown networking event. We grabbed drinks a few times a week. We kept it incredibly casual. She was fiercely independent, didn't pry into my past, and I didn't volunteer my trauma. The clean slate felt intoxicating, but behind the scenes, I was executing my demolition plan quietly, methodically, surgically. Every 2 weeks, like clockwork, Maya checked in with updates. Maya. Month 4. Julian proposed to Chloe. They're actively planning a spring wedding. Mom and dad are throwing them a massive engagement party at the country club next month. The family is really coming together. Everyone keeps talking about how resilient Julian and Chloe's love is. Elias, I'm so sorry. I know this is awful to read, but I promised I'd tell you. I responded exactly the same way I always did. Thanks for keeping me updated. Maya. Don't stress about me. What Maya didn't realize was that every single text message she sent gave me exactly what I needed. A timeline, progress markers, absolute, undeniable confirmation that my parents and brother had fully, completely committed to the delusional narrative where I was the bitter, unforgiving villain, and Julian and Chloe were the brave victims who found true love in the tragic aftermath of my departure. Perfect. I escalated my timeline. Chloe's absolute biggest client, a massive tech marketing firm called Meridian Creative, had been keeping her afloat for over 2 years. Their monthly retainer was essentially paying her rent. I had personally introduced her to the CEO, Marcus, back when we were newly engaged. Marcus and I were fraternity brothers in college. Good guy, incredibly loyal. I called Marcus in late May. Marcus, man, how's the Meridian Q3 rebrand looking? Solid. Elias. Chloe's doing decent work on the mock-ups. Why? What's up? Just checking in on my network, I said casually. Hey, have you met Sophie Pascal yet? She's a senior UX/UI designer who just relocated to your area from Portland. Her portfolio is absolutely insane. She specializes in exactly the kind of tech branding Meridian is pivoting toward. She's winning awards left and right. Oh, really? Marcus sounded intrigued. No, haven't heard of her. Send me her contact info. I did. I introduced them via a highly glowing professional email. I let Sophie's superior talent and my heavy recommendation take it from there. 2 weeks later, Maya texted, Chloe mentioned losing a massive client today. She was crying at dinner. She seems incredibly stressed about money. I didn't respond. I just turned another cell red. Julian's commercial real estate firm had been riding entirely on the momentum from the deals I had spoon-fed him. He was out there in the city pitching himself as the ultimate connector, the young hotshot who could link developers with top-tier engineering firms using my specific network and my company's name as his proof of concept. I started systematically redirecting that entire network. I called up the 3 major engineering firms Julian had been aggressively courting. I offered them direct partnerships with my Seattle branch. I handed them projects with vastly tighter margins, significantly faster timelines, and almost zero overhead risk. They didn't need any convincing. I had the proven 10-year track record of flawless execution. Julian only had empty promises and a slick smile. One by one, every single firm signed contracts with me, and completely ghosted Julian. Maya, month 5. Julian has been a nightmare lately. 3 huge business deals just completely vanished on him. He's working 18-hour weeks trying to salvage things. He and Chloe got into a screaming match at Mom's house last weekend. She accused him of not being able to provide for their wedding. Me? That's rough. Hope they figure it out. The financial stuff with my parents required a scalpel, not a hammer. It had to be perfectly legal and untraceable to malice. I had been covering my parents' $11,000 country club membership through my corporate expense account. It was a gray area of creative accounting, but the auditors never flagged it because I frequently hosted actual clients there when I lived in the city. I had been doing it for 3 years because Mom absolutely lived for the social status of that club, and Dad's independent consulting income was incredibly erratic. I simply stopped in July. I logged into the corporate portal and deleted the recurring payment authorization. I didn't say a word. The 2 luxury car leases were co-signed under my name. The annual renewal and credit check was coming up in August. I contacted the luxury dealership's finance department directly. I submitted the formal notarized paperwork to have my name completely removed as the financial guarantor. It was entirely legal. The dealership informed me they would have to run my parents' credit to see if they qualified on their own. Knowing Dad's credit history, I knew exactly how that would go. Finally, the big one, the $90,000 home equity line of credit. It was technically in their name, but the bank had only approved it because I had signed on as an income guarantor. I had my Seattle attorney draft and send the formal withdrawal of guarantee paperwork. The bank's policy dictated that the account holders be given a 90-day notice to either pay the balance or refinance under their own merits before the line was frozen and called due. Everything was done strictly by the book, quiet, invisible. Nobody noticed anything at first. These financial dominoes take time to fall, but when they fall, they crush everything. Maya, August, Mom got a really humiliating notice in the mail from the country club about severely overdue fees. She called them in a panic because she thought it was automatically handled by your old firm. They threatened to suspend her membership publicly. She's mortified. Me? Huh, that's strange. Corporate must have updated their vendor policies. Maya. September. Julian lost another massive development deal. He came to family dinner looking physically ill. He's lost weight. Chloe barely looked at him the whole night. She complained about having to take a part-time job. Maya. October. Dad's new investment venture completely collapsed. He couldn't secure the financing. The dealership also called him something about the car leases not being renewable. He was screaming on the phone in his office. Elias. Things are getting really dark here. I read every single message. I acknowledged each one with a polite, detached response. I gave absolutely nothing away. Then 2 weeks ago, my phone rang. It wasn't Maya. It was Mom's number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but a dark, morbid curiosity took over. I answered, Elias. Her voice was entirely different this time. She wasn't crying. She wasn't putting on the fake, optimistic family matriarch voice. She just sounded incredibly old and incredibly tired. Yes, sweetheart. We need to talk to you, please. Okay, we are. We're planning a family dinner, a reunion. She took a shaky breath. It's been almost a year. Honey. The family just isn't whole without you. We miss you. We all do. Please, Elias. We need you here. I heard shuffling on the other end of the line. The phone was being passed. Ash. It was Julian. He didn't call me Elias. He used my childhood nickname. His voice sounded like gravel, strained, desperate. Ash. I know I don't deserve it. I know I completely destroyed everything, but we're still brothers, man. Please, let's just sit down and talk face to face. Just give me 1 hour. I stood up from my leather desk chair. T. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked out at the sprawling, glittering Seattle skyline. They were scrambling. I could hear the absolute terror vibrating in their voices. The invisible scaffolding had fully collapsed, and they were in free fall, desperately reaching for the only parachute they knew. After a long, agonizing pause, I spoke. When Mom's relief was immediate, a breathless gasp, over the speaker. 2 weeks from Saturday, at the house, 6 p.m. Oh, thank you, sweetheart. Thank you so much. I'll be there. I hung up. My phone buzzed 10 seconds later. Maya, did they actually just call you? Are you really coming? Me? Yeah. It's time, Maya. Time for what, Elias? I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the window. I smiled slightly. I didn't respond to Maya. Instead, I opened my calendar, blocked off the weekend, and booked a first-class flight. Then, I opened the Excel spreadsheet one final time. Every single cell was red. The deals were redirected. The clients were moved. The financial support was entirely legally withdrawn. They just didn't fully comprehend the source of the destruction yet. This dinner wasn't about reconciliation. It was an autopsy. It was about them finally understanding the exact price of what they threw away. Update 2. I landed on Friday night. I rented a sleek black sedan at the airport, and drove straight to a high-end hotel downtown. I didn't tell anyone I was in the city early. I didn't drive by my old apartment complex. I just checked in, ordered room service, and went to sleep. I slept perfectly. 8 uninterrupted hours. Saturday morning, I hit the hotel gym, worked out hard, took a long shower, and went to a luxury barber across the street for a fresh cut. I dressed carefully. Dark tailored jeans, a crisp charcoal button-down shirt, an expensive watch Naomi had helped me pick out. Nothing overly flashy, but sharp, intimidatingly confident. I looked at myself in the mirror before I left the room. I searched for any lingering anxiety, any residual heartbreak. Nothing. I was a vault. I drove to my parents' house, pulling into the familiar suburban driveway at exactly 5:58 p.m. I parked right behind Maya's SUV and Julian's truck, which looked suspiciously unwashed and neglected. I sat in the car for a moment, checking my phone. A text from Naomi. Knock him dead, handsome. Call me when it's over. I smiled, locked my phone, and stepped out. I walked up the concrete path to the front door. It swung open before my knuckles could even touch the wood. Mom stood there. The change in her appearance was jarring. She looked like she had aged 5 years and 10 months. The perfectly maintained highlights were fading, and the forced, eager smile on her face was tight with underlying panic. Elias. She lunged forward for a hug. I let her wrap her arms around me, but I kept my arms strictly at my sides. I didn't lean in. I didn't reciprocate. I just stood there like a statue until she awkwardly pulled back, her smile faltering. Come in. Come in. Everyone is waiting in the dining room. The house smelled exactly the same. Pot roast, rosemary, and vanilla candles. A manufactured scent of domestic bliss. I followed her through the hallway. Dad stood up from his heavy oak chair at the head of the dining table. He extended his right hand. I took it. I gave him a firm, bone-crushing, professional handshake. Son, he said, his eyes darting nervously. Dad. Maya was sitting near the kitchen door with her husband, Tommy. She gave me a small, incredibly sad wave. Her eyes looked exhausted. And then there were Julian and Chloe. They were sitting on the far side of the table, shoulder to shoulder. Julian looked terrible. He had dark, heavy bags under his eyes, and his posture was entirely defeated. Chloe wouldn't even lift her head to look at me. She kept her eyes glued to the intricate lace tablecloth, her hands trembling in her lap. She wasn't wearing the gold necklace anymore. I walked to the far end of the table and took the empty seat, the exact chair I had sat in for 20 years of my life. "Can I get you something to drink, Elias?" Mom was already fluttering toward the kitchen, her hands shaking visibly. "We have that red wine you like or a beer. Water is fine." She practically ran to the kitchen, returning with a crystal glass of ice water. She sat it down and everyone finally took their seats. The silence in the room was suffocating. It was thick, heavy, and absolutely loaded with terror. Dad cleared his throat loudly. "Well, it is truly good to have everyone under one roof again." "Yeah," Julian chimed in, his voice slightly too high, too eager. "It's been way too long, Ash. Really good to see you, man." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my ice water. I set the glass down exactly on the coaster. I didn't say a word. Mom started serving the food with manic energy. Pot roast, garlic mashed potatoes, green beans with bacon, my absolute childhood favorites. The emotional manipulation was so blatant, it was almost insulting, but I had to give her credit for sticking to the playbook. We started eating. The small talk that happened around me was excruciating. Maya asked a polite question about Seattle's weather. I gave a two-word answer. Tommy nervously mentioned the recent NFL draft. Dad attempted a light-hearted joke about the housing market that landed with a sickening thud, considering Julian's current catastrophic career state. Julian kept shooting panicked, darting glances at me every 30 seconds like he was sitting next to an unexploded bomb and waiting for the timer to hit 0. Chloe just pushed a single piece of carrot around her plate, swallowing hard every few minutes. I ate calmly, mechanically. I chewed my food, wiped my mouth with the linen napkin, and acted as though I was at a mandatory corporate dinner with mid-level managers I actively disliked. After about 20 agonizing minutes, Dad carefully set down his silver fork. He wiped his mouth, sighed heavily, and placed his hands flat on the table. "All right," Dad announced, his voice taking on that authoritative head of the family tone. "I think we need to finally address the elephant in the room." I looked up from my plate. I leaned back in my chair, crossed my arms, and waited. "Son," Dad started looking directly at me. "We asked you to come here tonight because it is time. It's time to clear the air, bury the hatchet, and move forward. We are a family, and family is the most important thing in this world." "Okay," I said blankly. Mom jumped in immediately, sensing an opening. "Elias, we know things have been incredibly hard. We know you were deeply, deeply hurt by what happened. But sweetheart, family is forever. People make mistakes, terrible, heartbreaking mistakes. But what truly matters in the eyes of God and this family is how we heal from them." She was already tearing up, dabbing her eyes with her napkin. "Julian and Chloe, what happened between them wasn't planned to hurt you. They didn't do it out of malice. They found a connection, something real. And as painful as that is for you to accept, we have to acknowledge it and move on so we can all be happy." Chloe was crying now, silent, pathetic tears dripping off her chin onto her plate. Julian leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, looking at me with wide, pleading eyes. "Ash, I am so sorry. I have been violently sick with guilt every single day for the past 10 months. What I did to you was unforgivable. I know that I betrayed you, but I've grown so much since then. I've learned from my sins, and I need my big brother back, man." His voice cracked dramatically on the last word. "I know I don't deserve your grace, but we share the same blood. That has to count for something." Chloe finally found her voice. It was a whisper, raspy and broken. "I never wanted to destroy your heart, Elias. I hope you know that deep down. And I hope one day you can find it in your heart to be happy for us." They all stopped talking. They all stared at me. They were waiting for the climax of the movie. They were waiting for the tears to well up in my eyes. They were waiting for the angry shouting match followed by the exhausting, tearful hugs of forgiveness. They needed me to sign off on their absolution so they could finally stop feeling like monsters and get back to their comfortable lives. I slowly uncrossed my arms. I leaned forward, picked up my water glass, took one final sip, and set it down. "Are you all done?" I asked. My tone wasn't angry. It wasn't sarcastic. It was entirely flat, clinical, and vaguely curious. Dad blinked, thrown completely off balance. "Elias, we are trying to bridge a gap here." "No, you're not," I said, my voice cutting through the dining room like a scalpel. "You are not trying to bridge anything. You are performing. You have spent the last 10 months writing a fictional script where Julian and Chloe are star-crossed lovers. I am the bitter collateral damage, and you two are the noble peacekeepers. You've already decided exactly how this story ends. You just brought me here to get my signature on the final page so you can sleep at night." The room went graveyard still. Mom opened her mouth to protest, but I raised my hand the exact same way I had raised it in the bedroom 10 months ago. She snapped her mouth shut. "You brought me here for closure. I continued, my voice gaining a low, dangerous momentum. So, you can all feel better about the betrayal and move on without the crushing guilt. You want to pretend that my absence was just a temporary temper tantrum. Julian shifted uncomfortably, his face flushing red. That's not fair, Ash. I'm speaking. I snapped, the authority cracking like a whip. Julian flinched. I stood up slowly from my chair. I didn't slam my hands on the table. I didn't raise my voice. I just stood tall, projecting absolute dominance over the room. Here is what is actually going to happen tonight, I said, looking at each of their terrified faces. I am going to talk. You are going to sit there and listen, and then I am going to walk out that front door forever. And by the time my car leaves the driveway, you are going to understand exactly what you actually lost. Julian started to stand up, panic overriding his fear. Ash, come on, man. Don't do this. My eyes locked onto his. Sit down. He froze halfway up. His knees buckled slightly and he slowly sank back into his chair. Even Dad didn't dare move a muscle. Maya was staring at me with wide, horrified fascination. I let the crushing silence stretch for 10 full seconds. Julian, I started, turning my gaze to him. He swallowed hard. Do you remember the Harrison development deal? The massive commercial zoning project that essentially launched your entire independent career 2 years ago? He nodded slowly, confusion mixing with fear. Yeah, of course. That deal happened because my engineering firm was consulting on the city infrastructure. I personally called Greg Harrison. I connected you with the project lead. I put my own professional reputation on the line and vouched for you when your resume was literally a blank piece of paper. I know that, Julian whispered defensively. And I've always been grateful for the Hastings commercial partnership. I cut him off, my voice rising slightly. The Northgate Plaza luxury retail project, the initial seed financing for your independent LLC. Every single one of those happened because of direct connections I made for you, phone calls I made behind closed doors, recommendations I gave to men who trusted my word. Julian's face was rapidly draining of blood. I turned my head. Chloe. She flinched physically as I said her name. She looked up, her eyes red and terrified. Meridian Creative, I said smoothly. Your biggest anchor client for the past 2 years. The retainer that pays for your apartment and your lifestyle. She started shaking. I referred you to them. Marcus is my fraternity brother. I told him you were talented, reliable, and trustworthy. Silverton Tech, Cascade Brands, Palmer, and Associates. 3 of your top 5 highest paying contracts. All CEOs and VPs I personally introduced you to at my company galas. Chloe let out a tiny suffocated gasp. I slowly turned to the head of the table. Mom, Dad. Mom's fake, eager smile was entirely gone. Dad's jaw was clenched so tight, I thought his teeth might shatter. Your elite country club membership, I said, watching Dad's eyes widen in horror. The one you've been parading around for 3 years. I have been secretly covering that $11,000 annual fee through my corporate executive expense account. The 2 luxury car leases sitting in the driveway right now, both co-signed under my name, and my flawless credit score because Dad's credit was destroyed. The $90,000 home equity line of credit you used to remodel this very kitchen we are sitting in. Approved solely because my income was legally backing it. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum. Maya was staring at me, her hand covering her mouth. Tommy looked like he was witnessing a murder. Julian found his voice first. It was weak, trembling. Okay, so you helped us a lot. We know that, Ash. We're incredibly grateful for everything you may. I'm not finished, I stated, my voice dropping an octave. Julian closed his eyes. I stayed standing, calm, precise, lethal. 6 months ago, I said, enunciating every single syllable. I started systematically removing myself from the foundation of your lives. Julian's eyes snapped open. What? Meridian Creative. I looked at Chloe. I called Marcus. I introduced him to a vastly superior senior designer named Sophie Pascal. They officially transitioned all of your remaining contracts to her firm last month. They are dropping you. Chloe let out a guttural sob, burying her face in her hands. Harrison Development. I looked back at Julian. I redirected my firm's partnership exclusively to the Kellerman Group. They are your direct biggest competitor. Hastings Commercial, Northgate Plaza. The 3 massive upcoming projects you were desperately counting on for Q4. I personally steered every single one of those developers to vastly better, more experienced partners in Seattle. None of those deals are happening for you ever. Julian leaped out of his chair, his face contorted in absolute rage and panic. You can't do that. I have verbal agreements. I have letters of intent. Read the fine print. Julian, I sneered. Letters of intent, based on my firm's infrastructure backing. Backing that no longer exists. I turned back to my parents. The country club called you about overdue fees, because I permanently deleted the payment authorization 4 months ago. The car leases are up for annual renewal in 3 weeks. My name and my social security number have been legally removed from the guarantor files. You will have to qualify on your own credit. Good luck with that. Mom let out a wail, clutching her chest. Elias. No, please. And the $90,000 home equity line. I finished staring dead into Dad's eyes. My lawyer formally filed the withdrawal of guarantee paperwork in August. The 90-day grace period is up next week. The bank is going to freeze the account and call the balance due. It's done. Dad slammed both of his fists onto the oak table, rattling the china. He stood up, his face purple with fury. This is completely vindictive. This is psychotic. You are actively punishing all of us for what, Dad? I finally raised my voice, the sheer volume echoing off the walls. For my brother sleeping with my fiancée in my bed. For you and Mom instantly choosing fake family harmony over basic accountability. For expecting me to just swallow my pride, smile for the cameras, and keep funding the very people who stabbed me in the back. We gave you time, Dad roared back, pointing a trembling finger at me. We gave you space to heal. What more do you possibly want from us? I don't want a single damn thing from any of you, I said, my voice dropping back to that terrifying icy calm. That is the entire point of tonight. I am giving you exactly what you asked for, a life without my interference. Julian was pacing frantically behind his chair, pulling at his hair. Ash, please, I am begging you on my knees. Those commercial projects are my entire livelihood. I have massive debts I took out expecting those payouts. Chloe's contracts are her only income. We can't pay rent. We can't survive. You really should have factored that into your risk assessment before you decided my fiancé was worth destroying your brother over, I replied coldly. Julian lunged forward, grabbing my arm with a desperate, crushing grip. You can't do this to us. You're destroying our lives. I slowly looked down at his hand, gripping my forearm. Then I looked back up, into his terrified, tear-filled eyes. Let go of me. He didn't move. He was hyperventilating. Julian, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. Let go. He slowly released his grip, stepping back as if my skin burned him. I calmly adjusted the cuff of my shirt. You all made a choice, I said, sweeping my gaze across the destroyed room. Julian, you chose her over me. Chloe, you chose him over me. Mom, Dad. You chose keeping up appearances over standing up for what was morally right. You all made your choices. I am simply respecting them. I am removing myself from the equation. This is insane. Dad spat, pacing behind his chair. This isn't justice, Elias. This is cruelty. We are still your family. You have moral obligations to us. Obligations? I laughed. A short, harsh sound devoid of humor. Shared what? Shared expenses that I was secretly covering. Opportunities that I artificially created for you. Support that I bled out while you all took and took and took, and never once stopped to ask what it cost me. Mom was fully sobbing now, her face buried in her hands. We didn't know, Elias. I swear to God, we didn't know you were doing all of this for us. Exactly, I said softly. You didn't know because you never bothered to ask. You just blindly assumed the foundation holding up your perfect little lives would always be there, no matter how hard you kicked the pillars. I turned away from the table and started walking toward the hallway. The room instantly erupted behind me. Pure, unadulterated chaos. You're a vindictive piece of. You know that? Julian screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. Elias, come back here right now. This conversation is not over. Dad bellowed. Sweetheart, please, please don't leave us like this. Mom wailed. Chloe was just weeping loudly. A continuous broken sound of absolute ruin. Maya sat frozen in her chair, silent. Tommy looked at the floor. I reached the arched doorway of the dining room. I stopped, but I didn't turn around to look at them. I'm not doing this because I hate you, I said to the room, my voice carrying over their shouting. I'm doing this because you all made it painfully clear that I was entirely expendable to you. So now you get to find out exactly what happens when I'm actually gone. We are brothers, Elias. Julian sobbed from behind me. No, I replied, staring straight ahead at the front door. We were brothers. Now you're just the guy who slept with my fiancée in my bed and genuinely thought I was stupid enough to keep paying your bills. I walked down the hall. I opened the front door. I stepped out into the cool night air and pulled the door shut behind me, cutting off the sounds of screaming and crying. I walked down the driveway, got into my rental car, and started the engine. Through the large front bay window of the house, I could see the chaos unfolding. Julian was pacing violently, throwing his hands in the air. Dad was pointing and shouting at Mom. Mom had collapsed into her chair, weeping. Chloe was standing in the corner, looking like her entire world had just been vaporized. Maya was the only one who walked to the window. She stood there looking out at my car. Our eyes met through the glass. She didn't look angry. She didn't look betrayed. She just looked incredibly sad and deeply understanding. She gave me one microscopic nod. My phone instantly lit up in the cup holder. A flood of messages. Julian, you are going to regret this for the rest of your miserable life. Mom. Elias, please come back inside. We can call the bank. We can fix this. Dad, do not drive away from this house, son. I mean it. I picked up the phone, I flipped it to silent. I dropped it back into the cup holder. I shifted the car into reverse. Backed out of the driveway and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I watched the house shrink into the distance. The lights were blazing. Silhouettes were moving frantically behind the curtains, the complete and utter destruction of the lie they had built. I turned onto the main highway, rolled the windows down, turned the music up, and headed straight for the airport, back to Seattle, back to my actual life, a life they had absolutely no part in anymore. Update 3. 6 months later, 3 months after the dinner, I was officially promoted to regional director of the entire Pacific Northwest Division. I was the youngest director in the company's 70-year history. The announcement came during a massive quarterly meeting in a downtown high-rise. My boss gave a long glowing speech about my unmatched vision, ruthless efficiency, and flawless execution. People clapped. I shook a lot of hands, went back to my corner office, and immediately got back to work. Life is good. Actually, genuinely good. I've been seeing Naomi exclusively now. It naturally evolved from casual drinks to something deeply real and comfortable. She's incredibly sharp, fiercely driven, and doesn't need me to be anything other than exactly who I am. We cook dinner together 3 times a week. We hike on the weekends. We talk about our careers without ego. Seattle is my city now. The rain, the skyline, the water, all of it. Maya still texts me every few weeks. Her updates arrive like clockwork. They are always strictly informational, completely devoid of guilt tripping. She knows exactly where the boundary is, and she respects it, but she still goes to the family dinners. That is Maya's cross to bear. She is forever stuck in the middle, desperately trying to hold together the ashes of a family that burned itself to the ground. Maya, month 2, post-dinner. Julian's business officially filed for bankruptcy. It turns out he had taken out massive high-interest loans from some very shady private lenders using those 3 commercial deals you killed as guaranteed collateral. Now that the deals are dead, the lenders are coming after him aggressively. He had to sell his truck to cover a fraction of the debt. He's facing potential legal action for fraud. Maya, month 3, post-dinner. Chloe was formally evicted from her luxury apartment. Without Meridian Creative, she couldn't even cover half the rent. She had to move into a tiny studio in a terrible part of town. She took a full-time job as a junior graphic designer at a local print shop making minimum wage. She looks exhausted. She and Julian fight constantly. It's toxic. Maya, month 4, post-dinner. Mom and Dad put the house on the market yesterday. They are trying to spin it to their country club friends as downsizing for their golden years. But the truth is the bank froze the HELOC, demanded the $90,000 balloon payment, and they couldn't secure a refinance because Dad's credit is shot. They lost both the Lexus and the BMW. They are driving a used Honda now. The stress is destroying their marriage. I read every single message. I usually just send back a thumbs up emoji or a simple, "Thanks for the update, Maya. Hope you and Tommy are doing well." I never ask follow-up questions. I never gloat. I just observe the physics of cause and effect playing out from 2,000 miles away. Last month, Chloe found my new email address probably snooping through Maya's phone or LinkedIn. She sent me a massive 3-page email. The subject line was, "I was so incredibly wrong. Please read." It was a desperate, pathetic manifesto. She confessed that Julian had become emotionally abusive the second the money dried up. She admitted that their true love was entirely built on the financial security and social status that I had been secretly providing for Julian. She said she realized I was the only man who ever truly took care of her, that she made the biggest mistake of her life and begged me to just call her, so she could hear my voice. She said she would leave Julian tomorrow if I just gave her a sign. I read the entire email while drinking my morning coffee. I felt absolutely nothing, not even a spark of vindication. She was just a stranger begging for a lifeboat she had personally set on fire. I didn't reply. I forwarded the entire email directly to Julian's personal inbox with no subject line and no message attached. Then, I permanently blocked both of their email addresses. Maya texted me 2 days later saying Julian had completely destroyed Chloe's studio apartment in a blind rage, and they had officially broken off the engagement. Last night, Naomi and I were sitting on the balcony of my apartment. The Seattle skyline was glowing against the dark water of the Puget Sound. She was curled up in a blanket, reading a massive legal brief for an upcoming trial. I was sipping a glass of bourbon, watching the ferries cross the water. "You're quiet tonight," Naomi said, not looking up from her papers. "Everything okay with the new corporate merger?" "Merger's fine," I replied, taking a sip of the bourbon. "Just thinking about consequences." She finally looked up, her sharp eyes studying my face. She knew the broad strokes of my past, even if she didn't know every single agonizing detail. She knew enough to understand what I meant. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. Dropping the nuclear bomb on them. I looked out at the city lights. I thought about Mom crying over her lost country club status. I thought about Dad's shattered ego. I thought about Julian drowning in fraudulent debt, realizing he was nothing without my invisible hand. I thought about Chloe sitting in a tiny, damp apartment, realizing she traded a diamond for a worthless rock. No, I said truthfully, turning to look at Naomi. I regret trusting people who didn't deserve it. I regret spending years of my life building a castle for people who were perfectly willing to lock me in the dungeon. But walking away, letting gravity do its job, that saved my life. Naomi smiled. A genuine warm expression. Good. Because the man who let people use him sounds exhausting. I much prefer the regional director sitting in front of me. I laughed. A real deep laugh. My phone buzzed on the glass table. One new message from Maya. Maya just leaving Sunday dinner. It was awful. Just Mom, Dad, and me. They sold the house. They're moving into a 2-bedroom condo next week. Mom just cried into her wine the whole time. Dad just stared at the wall. Julian didn't even show up. I think this is the end of the family, Elias. I really do. I stared at the text. I typed my response carefully. Me. You don't have to keep going to those dinners. Maya. You're allowed to save yourself, too. My guest room in Seattle is always open for you and Tommy. I hit send. I put the phone on silent, flipped it face down on the table, and turned my attention back to the woman sitting across from me and the beautiful, untouchable life I had built from the ashes. The foundation is solid now because this time I'm the only one standing on.